You're listening to Just Asking, a conversation about human sexuality and how to approach it with intelligence, understanding, and compassion.
Hi, you're listening to Stephen Ng, and I'm talking to my friend Jackie. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
And I want to invite everybody who's listening to tune into conversation about sex in a way that you may not be able to have in your own life, but you can at least join us virtually. And if you care to join us, you can even send us an email or something else. We'll give you some information at the end of our podcast. But Jackie, I understand you had something you wanted to talk about.
So have you seen the new iteration of Queer Eye?
I have. And you want to talk about that?
I do. I want to talk about that, but in a bigger context, because it reminds me of when you talk about the importance of male friendships. And it seems like all of this kind of goes together.
Yeah, do you mind? I want to interrupt you because I want to talk about something too. I just read a Dear Abby thing this last week that really actually disturbed me. And a lot of times I find myself agreeing with the advice that's given. Sometimes I don't agree. Okay, a lot of times I don't agree. But I was especially troubled by the conversation she was having with one of her writers. And do you mind if I share that with you first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this gal is writing Abby about, and it's just this last week, about being a 29-year-old female and still a virgin. That's her opening sentence. So I knew that you had some experience with virginity, no matter how long ago it was. And I figured that we could talk about this because she says that her decision to remain a virgin was based mostly on her religious beliefs, but also because she hasn't met the right guy. And then she goes on to say, rather than feel proud of my virginity, I feel ashamed. At this point, I'm worried that if I tell a guy I'm a virgin, I'll be rejected. Throughout my teens and 20s, I believed that waiting for Mr. Right was the best route for me. Now that I'm older, it's become a constant weight on my shoulders. And then she talks about a guy that she met. And finally, she concludes, I'm concerned about my future. I'm afraid I won't meet the right guy and that I'll make a bad decision with the wrong guy. Any advice or words of encouragement? And Abby's...
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
So 29, she's still a virgin. And already I'm having trouble reading this because I'm thinking, okay, that in itself is somewhat unusual, but not outside of the realm of human experience. I mean, some people just wait to have sex until they don't.
Sure.
And that seemed okay. But the thing about the virginity, it wasn't so much about the waiting. It was about that very important tissue we call a hymen that seems to have so much symbolic importance.
Sure. But you know what jumped out at me on this is when she says that she's waiting for the right guy to give her virginity to. So much pressure on that guy at this point, right?
I feel for him.
I think it's, I did wait. I gave my virginity. I don't say lost, I say gave, when I found the right guy. And so I do understand, granted, it was, a decade before what she's talking about, but it's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure on him.
Well, and it's a lot of pressure, I think, on her, to be honest with you, because the right guy, I mean, it allows, to use a baseball metaphor, in your first at-bat in the major leagues, you can't make any mistakes.
Right.
You have to hit a home run. And that just seems like an impossible thing to do for just about anybody. And I do know that there are people who maintain their virginity till they get married and then they live together until they die. And I know that happens, of course, but the odds of that happening for any of us seem so long, particularly in light of the fact that we, as a civilization, although we pay lip service to the value of the family, we really don't teach young people anything about how to do family successfully. And so just regarding the subtopic of mate selection, how am I possibly going to do a great job of picking a mate by a reasonable time, let's say sometime before 80? How am I going to pick a mate that is actually a mate who is actually going to be my partner for the rest of my life in a satisfying, rewarding way? And, oh yeah, what if he becomes an alcoholic 10 years later? Does that mean I picked the wrong guy? Does that mean I'm obligated to stay? Well, this thing with virginity, Abby goes on to say, all single people face the dilemma you are facing at one point or another. Too often, they make painful mistakes that they later regret. Well, okay, I gotta keep reading. You, however, dodged a bullet. Virginity is a gift that can be given only once. Rather than feel disappointed, be glad. Be glad you didn't waste it on a man who is already in a relationship and has 2 children to support. You say you're religious? If that's true, have enough faith to believe that you will meet the right guy at the right time. You might benefit by talking with your spiritual advisor, and if that's not possible, get to a psychologist who can help you regain confidence in your judgment. This business about the right guy and you dodged a bullet, all of this, that's like line by line, is very disturbing to me.
It's a lot of pressure. Puts a lot of pressure on her.
Too much pressure?
I think too much pressure. I mean, no.
Well, isn't adult life, as in teen life, isn't it about making mistakes that you bitterly regret?
Well,
because that's how we learn.
Right. It's funny. I've talked to some of my friends. One of my friends had her son was 22 or 23 and had never been in a relationship, never in high school or anything. And he met the love of his life when he was 22. And she said when she breaks up with him, it's going to be so hard and she did, a couple years after that, because he didn't have any of the practice. He had never gone through it in high school. He'd never had a crush earlier.
Yeah, it's like getting the mumps when you're 40.
And you've never been sick.
Right. You're supposed to get that when you're a younger person. You can survive better. And instead of virginity or your hymen being something that I think needs to be clung to, I think, what about development of judgment as something that we need to aspire to? I mean, to develop my judgment so that I pick good people to be involved with. That seems to me to be the thing, not to avoid making a mistake. It's to preemptively be more thoughtful.
Well, and I do like her advice about talking to a spiritual counselor, talking to a psychologist about this, for just that reason. Hopefully, they're going to talk to her about judgment and about how to make good decisions and how not to put all this pressure on herself, because this implies that if she had slept with that guy with the kids, that her life is over. She blew it. She had one gift to give. She gave it to the wrong guy, and now it's done.
Well, yeah, and it's a little bit like that old saying about preachers' kids, how they're always the worst kids in town because they drink the most, and what the thinking there is, you don't drink one beer, because if you've drunk one beer, then you've really disappointed the Lord and you've sinned greatly. And they're thinking, well, I might as well be hanged for a sheep as for a lamb. I mean, why should I not drink the whole case if I'm already damned for all time, or in such hot water with God? He can't be any madder if I drink two or three 6-packs or 12-packs.
So let me ask you, Stephen. So if she had written that letter to you, what advice?
I don't know if I like where you're going with this.
What would you have told her?
Well, I think I hadn't even thought about that. Thanks for asking me that one. Jeez. I think I would have asked her, as a good counselor, probably, what being a virgin still meant to her, and I would have played for time. Counselors are famous for that. But she's already been saying, rather than feeling proud of my virginity, I feel ashamed. And I guess I'd want to zoom in on what is it she feels ashamed of, because I don't think it's that she still owns a hymen.
And what does she feel proud of?
Yeah, and being proud because I haven't succumbed to my sexual lust like other people, like Jackie, for example. Like so many millions of other American youths, I haven't caved in and casually had sex. And I like the idea of not casually having sex.
Sure.
But I also think, as that, she talks about the guy that she met and she really liked him, and she also acknowledges that she can't get him out of her mind. She betrays a woeful naivete that isn't solved by maintaining a hymen. Her naivete about romance and sex and mate selection is really best assuaged through experience. And I don't mean necessarily doing it. I mean dating and interviewing people and talking to them about what you need and what you want and what you like. I think as a therapist, I'd be wanting to get a little more sex into the discussion by talking to her about her history of masturbation, because in this very explicit conversation about the hymen, she says nothing about how frequently she masturbates or at what age she began. And I think coming to acknowledge that she too has sexual needs, just like every other sexual being, and that those needs go beyond orgasm, because that's what basically masturbation does for you. It gives you some sort of sexual release, but it doesn't take care of your need for sexual love, does it?
No, but it helps you understand what you like.
Yeah, and how you need to be touched by someone else.
Sure.
And it also tells you something about how frequently or how you like to have sex, or at least how much of an appetite you have at any given moment in your life. So I think I'd want to talk to her about that rather than, you go, girl, hang on to that hymen as long as you need to. And yeah, that just doesn't really ring true.
I remember what my mom said to me, and we did not do the ongoing conversations about sex like you recommend. But the one thing she said to me was, I don't expect you to wait until you're married to have sex, because that would be ridiculous.
That's very permission giving.
She said, but I expect there to be mutual respect and responsibility.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I can do that.
You might be the only person in America who ever got that advice.
I've given the same advice to my children. And I did.
Wow.
I waited until I was in love. I was 18 years old. I was in love. We had sex. And it was responsible and respectful, and, it was amazing and wonderful and giving.
Wow. Yeah, no, that sounds so much better than waiting until you're 28 for, what'd she have? Oh, yeah, nothing.
Well, and again, I was obviously with somebody else. I was with my husband by 28, having had sex with, one or two in between. Again, to experience, and again with you, I'm not saying that she should go out and just have sex with whoever, but is she even having relationships? It sounds like this is the first guy she's ever been on a date with. Yeah,
she really does have that sound if you read between the lines. And I think, as long as we're going to camp out on this Dear Abby letter a little bit, I just also think that it's important to talk about religion, because so often religion sees itself in being in competition with sexuality, because the two, after all, are so much alike. I mean, they both are selling us a sense of awe and some sort of meaning in life, and an experience that really speaks of the transcendent and takes us out of ourselves in a very big way. And for that, I can see why there's market competition between the two, but I think there's an unnecessary competition and an unnecessary hostility. However, I've noticed that in many religions, since religion is, after all, optional and our sexuality is permanently installed, our religions seem to have a universal problem in failing to prepare believers for managing sexuality intelligently. And someday, I really think we need to do a whole show on that.
Yeah, because my mind's going to all these different places right now, and
Okay, make a note.
Okay, I have a note. So we've talked about your thing. Can we talk about my thing now?
I want to talk about your thing.
Okay, so male friendships.
Now, okay, so I watched Queer Eye. I thought it was good. This reboot, most reboots don't ever need to be made. This was a reboot that was so superior to the original show.
And the original was great.
Yeah, and the original was okay from my point of view. But this one is really great because it looks at men holistically. Mm-hmm. And I love what they do by addressing not just his grooming and his attire, but everything that's going on in his life, his relationships and his behaviors, what he's doing with his wife,
overcoming
and his girlfriend,
his fears, dealing with the things, figuring out what's holding him back.
All of that, and it's very touching and very moving. I think one criticism I've heard is that, yeah, but that's not enough. You need more than that. You need more than a couple of days with 5 gay guys to straighten yourself out. And I think that that's a fair statement to make, but I don't think we need to despise any progress until we have all the progress. I think it's okay to make some changes before we can make all the changes in our lives. And I think they they get these guys off to great starts, whether they're working with a straight guy or a gay guy. There's just so much good stuff that happens. I double dare any straight guy listening to this to watch one of those shows and not be moved by what you see when men start helping men. And that brings us to the men friends thing.
Right. Because one of them, and I binge watched this. I watched the whole thing, over the course of a week. It was the one, and I can't remember now, but the man was working, they had like 5 kids, and he was working 2 jobs to support the kids, and his wife was staying home, which you would do with 5 kids. But he said to him, how do you dress when you go out on dates with your wife? And the man just kind of gestured to himself and said like this. He wears jeans.
This was the cop. He was like a highway patrolman, and he only wears sports clothes, and he dresses in flip-flops and shorts to take his wife out to dinner.
And the man said,
this is it. This is
I wish I had remembered the man's name from Queer Eye. And he said, really? So you don't put any effort into how you look for your wife? And he said, well, no, I'm tired. I work, and it was the same man thing. I work hard for her. She knows I love her, right? Because I do all these things. And he said, how does your wife dress for you on your dates? And you just saw the look on the guy's face. And he's like, oh.
Yes.
And that's where I think the friendship thing, like having friends who will call out their friends on a variety of behaviors, but on that, just help them see things in a different way.
Well, this is one of those things, one of those experiences where you can clearly see the difference between one man confronting another. It has nothing to do, by the way, with orientation, just one man confronting another versus being nagged by your wife or nagged by your mom or nagged by your sister. And because you can be so dismissive of that as a man. She doesn't know what a man is. This is what a man is. And I've got this right. She wouldn't be with me if she didn't like me, just the way I am. And of course, that's nonsense, because most women put up with an awful lot in the men that they love. I want to also, I had a dare for the men to go watch that show, but I also have a kind of a, what can I call it? A severe storm advisory or a severe romance advisory for women. Any woman out there who considers getting together with a man who doesn't have significant and healthy male friendships is crazy, because those male friendships tell you so much about the man that you're so interested in. And if his friends aren't helping him to become a better man, and I don't mean better by her point of view, but just a better man, objectively speaking, kinder, more loving, more generous, more caring. And if we're not getting inspired to be more of a stand-up guy who's more true to his word, if we're not being inspired to grow beyond where we are, then we really don't have friends. We have drinking buddies, we have work buddies, but we don't really have friends who are like brothers to us.
Well, and you see so often when women, when you get in a relationship with a man and you want all of him, and you don't want him to have friends of his own. You want him to spend all of his time with you. And why does he need these other people? Why does he need to go out drinking with them when he could be home with me? Type of thing. And I agree with you. And I this is something I've had to learn as I've gotten older, is when I start to date somebody, I will look at his friends. And you can tell a lot about a person by the people they choose to spend their time with.
Yeah, and another big thing that really applies to women having friends as well is that, when I get together with the woman I love, I want to be her boyfriend. I have zero aspiration of being her
girlfriend,
best new girlfriend.
Right.
And so she's going to need girlfriends with whom she can speak as women speak to women and not be judged and be really understood. But he needs the same thing in the world of men, to be able to share things as a man with other men and to be, well, first and foremost, to be understood apart from how does this threaten our relationship? What is this meaning about us? Are you trying to tell me something? And we get to skip all that. And there's as much as I love and adore my wife, I have to say, there is a palpable sense of relief when I settle into the company of my men friends. It's like, So
tell me about that. Is it that you can, Is it that you can put your hands down your pants and burp and fart? And I mean, it's obviously more than that, right? I mean, what is it about? What's the comfort?
I'm not even going with that. I mean, you say more than that. Actually, I don't think I've ever done that in my life with my male friends.
It's not like the sitcom show. You're saying it's different than TV.
Yeah. It's definitely different from watching a bunch of hogs out in a corral somewhere wallowing in the mud. I think, I believe very strongly, for myself at least, in rituals because I'm a bit of a workaholic. It's really easy for me to come straight home after I work and hang out at home because I'm a homebody. And I set up rituals where I have appointments to join my friends for meals. And I have a friend I've had breakfast with for the last 15 years. I have another friend who comes over to my house for dinner and has for the last 24 years. And still another friend, we get together for lunch. And that's a new one. And we've only been doing that less than a year. So for me, all these weekly touches, touching base with my friends, are so important because they ground me. They remind me who I am. They remind me who I want to be as a man. And then I get to be my more authentic self when I'm talking to my wife.
That's what I was just going to ask you is having these male companionship. That sounds wrong. Your male friends who are actual friends, like you said, not drinking buddies.
Yeah, like brothers.
Like brothers. Makes your relationship, your romantic relationship, better.
Absolutely. And I think the same is true for women who have women friends. In fact, I playfully was daring women to not ever get involved with a guy who didn't have friends. And the reason there is we have so many emotional needs. And I believe at her very best, a wonderful woman can at her very best only be a wonderful part of an otherwise wonderful life. She cannot be my entire social support network because, like one of those old Hollywood movies, I need a supporting cast of thousands.
Well, you.
I have needs. and I need people to puncture my swollen ego. I need guys who help me get more real. I need guys to really take care of me in ways that no one woman ever could. And I think women are in the same place where they have a multitude of needs and no one guy can ever meet those needs. In fact, we're even supposed to be sharing our lives together, right? Mm-hmm. How do you share a life with one another if you don't have a life? If I'm nothing without her and she goes out of my life and I have nothing and I'm all alone and I don't know how to be with myself, then I really don't have a life. It's only when I have a life that I can share one, and my friends help me build that life that is worth living and ultimately worth sharing.
Well, and one of the things that you've talked about before, I think you might have written a column about it, is learning intimacy skills.
Yeah.
And if you don't have friends to build those skills with.
Well, think about it this way.
And this brings us back to the virginity.
Yeah. Well, what's hard? What is more challenging? Friendship, which is a very intimate relationship, if we're going to be talking about inner circle friends, or romance that's truly successful and sustainable. Well, obviously, friendship is easier because it's the same kind of intimacy, but missing the very challenging aspects of romance and sex. And, it's not with a person of a different gender, typically. And so we're going to try to have, I think it makes more sense for everybody to have same gender relationships that are friendships, because that's kind of like the kindergarten of what it is we're looking for in our romantic sexual relationships. Even if I'm gay and I'm interested in men sexually, I need platonic relationships in order to get ready for my romantic relationships. So, without that developmentally, I just don't think most of us are ever going to get there.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know that in my past, maybe some of my relationships where the man didn't have his own friends, I wasn't worried about it because I have plenty of friends for the both of us. And,
the problem is in the divorce, in the property settlement, she gets all the friends and they all leave with her. And then he's left all alone again. And I just think in terms of the litmus test of really getting to know another person and to know if they're right for you, if you hate all of his friends, if you hate all of her friends, you're with the wrong person, because people's friends are a huge reflection of who they are. And I think it says a lot of good things about the relationship if you really like their friends and you're able to enjoy them. They don't have to become your friends, but to at least appreciate them and enjoy them as human beings. I think that's important. One last thing before we close, I want to bring up this word platonic, because in the thousands of clients I've had over my career, most people don't understand the notion of what a platonic relationship can be. And what we mean when we say platonic is a relationship that's free of the animal passions. And if you're a man who likes women, it's just not possible to be friends. I know that's a controversial statement.
You always want to start a whole new thing right at the end.
Well, we'll address that in another time. But it's every time I've ever talked to a guy, he said, no, it's platonic now. We did that. We already hit that a long time ago, and that's not platonic. It's well, I think we need to do another little discussion.
Yeah, I'll write this down in our notes. And anybody who's listening, please watch Queer Eye. And you'll notice it's not Queer Eye for the straight guy anymore, because sometimes they are gay guys that they're helping, which I think is also great. So thank you so much for listening. Stephen, thank you for another delightful conversation.
Yeah. And what should they do if they want to
they can tweet us at Stephen Ng MFT.
All righty then.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Just Ask Ng. If you have questions for Stephen Ng, please tweet us at Stephen Ng MFT.